Parents are human beings, and that naturally means that they make mistakes, yell too much, or do potentially damaging things to their kids, even unintentionally. However, for most parents, their impulse is to do better and to make things right. What happens, however, when the parental relationship turns toxic? I'll answer that question next. Hi, I'm Kim Feeney with Butterfly Beginnings Counseling, and welcome to my channel. I'm a licensed independent social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor with over 10 years of experience helping children and families to lead healthier emotional lives. I'd love to help your family too, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell for weekly notifications on the latest content. To start us off, let's begin by defining exactly what a toxic parent is. To be clear, toxic parent isn't a medical term or a clearly defined concept. When people discuss toxic parents, they're typically describing parents who consistently behave in ways that cause guilt, fear, or obligation in their children. Their actions aren't isolated events, and they are patterns of behavior that negatively shape their children's lives. A toxic parent is more concerned with their own needs than whether or not they're doing hurtful things to their children. And they likely won't apologize or even admit what they're doing is wrong. And the abuse or neglect tends to be ongoing or progressive. The term toxic parent is an umbrella term for parents who display some of the following characteristics, starting with self-centered behaviors. Your parent may be emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, or perhaps uncaring when it comes to things that you need. It may feel like all situations return to the same question: what about me? They always put their feelings first. These types of parents may believe that their feelings should come first during family matters. And this is an antiquated way of thinking that is not going to foster positive relationships. Even though parents do need to make the final decision about everything from dinner to vacation plans, it's necessary to consider at least the feelings of every family member, including the children. If you're looking for a supportive place to discuss family and parenting concerns, consider joining our Facebook group for calm, empathetic, and supportive parents and caregivers using the link below in the description. Toxic individuals constantly force their children to suppress their own feelings just to appease their parents. Everything is about the parent and their feelings. If there's one trait that most toxic parents share, it's this one. Toxic parents struggle to separate themselves and their feelings from their parenting. They can't grasp that the role of the parent is one of service, that their job is to give their kids the best possible chance to grow and to develop into well-rounded, healthy human beings. Toxic parents seem to think, oh, the kids are fine. They wave their hand and say something about how kids are resilient and they don't need much. And then they turn around and complain that their kids don't give them any love and respect. Often they are the toxic type of parent who doesn't recognize that parenting really does take work and that little kids aren't trying to be jerks. They're also prone to gushing about how much they love their kids, even though they never seem to say or do anything of substance about who the kids are because they don't really know their children. They're also emotional loose cannons. They overreact or create tons of drama. They make mountains out of molehills. Some toxic parents can't discern a big problem from a small one. In their eyes, every little act of disobedience, every poor grade, every dirty sock on the floor is the end of the world. Such toxic parents typically don't know how to pick their battles, so they harp on every little thing, often raising anxious children who are petrified to fail, or impulsive kids who don't care about anything because they're always in trouble. They just can't win. Toxic parents also overshare. They share improper information and details about their lives. Toxic parents fail to provide their children with affirmation and security. Some of them even believe that showing tough love is an important way to ensure their children learn how to take care of themselves in the future. However, those types of children practically fall apart now because of any perceived failure or rejection. And this stems from a toxic parent's refusal to provide them with the right amount of security and affirmation when they were young. Tough love might work sometimes, but it cannot be the only approach a parent takes. Toxic parents do not allow their children to express negative emotions. Parents who refuse to nurture their child's emotional needs and make light of their negative emotions are setting up a future where the child will feel unable to express what they need. There's nothing wrong with helping children to see the positive side of any situation. However, being completely dismissive of a child's negative feelings and emotional needs can lead to mental health issues such as depression and anxiety in the future. Toxic parents demand too much of your attention. They often make their children parental substitutes by demanding their attention. This can be seen as bonding between the parent and child, but it's really a parasitic relationship that requires too much of the child's time and energy, when they should be focused on learning other skills and playing with their friends. They also hold the child responsible for their happiness. If one of your parents spent a lot of time telling you how much they gave up for you in connection with their happiness, then they were placing unrealistic expectations on your role in their life. No child should ever be accountable for their parents' happiness. Also, parents should never demand that children give up things to make them happy or to even out the score. Toxic parents also expect their kids to agree with them about practically everything. Some children grow up with parents who will not allow them to express different thoughts or opinions. If you choose to disagree with such a parent, they might accuse you of being headstrong, rebellious, stupid, or even worse. And they don't see their children as autonomous individuals. For too many toxic parents, their child is merely an extension of themselves, and little more than that. They might even fear the day their kid attempts to be more independent and spend years trying to prevent them from fully expressing their thoughts and feelings. Parents like this often fall into the camp of the children should be seen and not heard variety. These types of parents are also uncomfortable when their child is happy. As much as people love to say that all parents want what's best for their children, many of us know that that simply isn't true. Some toxic parents aren't happy when their kids are happy. They may be jealous or resentful even of their own children. In addition, these kids are not allowed to ask questions or express their honest feelings. Toxic parents are often terrible at processing human emotions that aren't their own, or they might struggle to work through their own emotional issues that pop up when they do become parents. When their kids express honest feelings, toxic parents often reply that they shouldn't feel that way. Again and again, their children get the message that they're wrong for having their thoughts and feelings. A second way that toxic parenting shows up is through verbal and physical abuse. Abuse may not always be hitting, yelling, threats, or something totally obvious. You may encounter something more subtle like name-calling, shifting of blame, the silent treatment, or even gaslighting. They may make toxic jokes about you. All parents occasionally pick on their children, but when the so-called jokes become commonplace, this can be a huge problem. And you do not need to accept this type of behavior just because your parent has always joked about something such as your height or your weight. Ultimately, this is an undermining tactic that can make you feel very bad about yourself. They may give you the silent treatment. It can be hard to talk to someone when you're angry, and shutting out a child with the silent treatment is very damaging and immature. Dishing out this passive-aggressive treatment hurts any type of relationship and makes the recipient feel pressured into fixing the situation, even if they may not have done anything wrong. If the parent is too mad to have a rational conversation, they should excuse themselves for a few minutes instead of blatantly ignoring the child. The abuse may also show up as harsh criticism. Nothing you do is ever good enough. These types of parents don't respect your good traits or your achievements. Everyone's parents criticize them from time to time. However, without this component, we might never learn to do numerous things properly, such as everyday chores like washing laundry. And a toxic parent, though, takes this to extremes by being overly critical on everything their child does. Parents make the mistake of believing that they do this to make sure their children avoid making mistakes in the future. Unfortunately, what this behavior does is cause the child to develop a harsh inner critic. This can be crippling when going into adulthood. Toxic parents are often more judgmental of their own kids than anyone else's. Some of you grew up with parents who are constantly asking, "Why couldn't you be more like Jill or Johnny across the street?" Perhaps it felt like they had something good to say about every single one of your classmates, but when it came to the way they talked about you, all they did was complain. Some toxic parents cause you to justify terrible behavior. Did you grow up believing that your parent was physically or emotionally abusive to you because you deserved it? If so, you may still be justifying the terrible behavior of others at your own expense. Toxic parents have that ability to twist any situation to suit their needs, and this leaves their children with two choices: accept that their parent is wrong or internalize all the blame. In most cases, children, even those who are adults now, choose the latter option. and in some cases they scare even their adult children. Respect and fear do not need to go hand in hand. In fact, children who feel loved, supported, and connected are more likely to be happy as adults. Although discipline of some sort will inevitably be necessary from time to time, non-toxic parents do not use highly fearful actions and words that are permanently damaging to their children. Children should not need to be afraid to be respectful, and adults should not need to end up feeling anxious every time their parent calls or emails. Again, as we've been discussing, toxic parents discipline out of anger or fear. Anytime a parent disciplines their child, the expectation is that they're doing it out of love. The whole purpose of discipline in parenting is to teach your child. The meaning of discipline is really to teach. And we're teaching our children how to better navigate the world in a responsible way. However, lots of toxic parents lose sight of the whole point of discipline. Instead, they end up disciplining their kids as a knee-jerk reaction to their own emotions. They might feel angry, annoyed, disappointed, embarrassed, or even scared when their child behaves a certain way. And they feel compelled to nip things in the bud, instead of understanding the big picture and what's going on with their kids. Sometimes they may even go so far as to withhold love and affection as a form of punishment. Many parents get confused or worried about what might be seen as overindulgent parenting. They might wonder whether it's okay to hug or soothe a child who's been acting out. A toxic parent, however, often has no impulse to soothe their misbehaving child. Instead, they resort to withholding their love as a means of discipline. Our third way that toxic parenting rears its ugly head is through controlling behaviors. Toxic parents may invade your privacy or not allow you to make your own decisions. Maybe they're overly critical and controlling of your decisions, even if you're an adult. For starters, they don't believe in a child's privacy. Especially as a kid grows older, some parents really struggle to give them space. They might do things like read through their kids' diaries, or rummage through their backpacks, or look through their notes. Children who wish to lock their doors to work on a project alone might be regarded with suspicion. Such parents justify dismissing their kids' requests for privacy by insisting it's in their house and their rules. Kids don't need privacy unless they're up to no good. Parents like these often have a hard time seeing their child's emotional needs for privacy. Along with this is a lack of boundaries. Toxic parents tend to push and push and push to get their way. And as you tire from their tactics, you may simply give in to ideas or situations out of exhaustion or frustration. Parents justify keeping a close eye on their children, and in certain situations it may be necessary to do a bit of snooping to keep them safe. However, everyone needs to be able to set boundaries for themselves, especially teenagers. Parents who are toxic override these boundaries at every turn, and this causes numerous problems. For example, a toxic parent will open their child's door without knocking. This sets up a pattern that makes it hard for children to properly recognize and understand boundaries later in life. Comment below and let me know how you set healthy boundaries with your children. Toxic parents like to co-opt their children's goals. This can seem like the actions of someone who is interested in their child's life, but what it often does, it makes it harder for the child to meet their goals. For example, if you must sell 50 boxes of cookies while your mom decides to make cookies and pass them out to the neighbors, that's going to make it a lot harder to sell and hit your sales goal. They also want their children to follow in their footsteps or live out their unfulfilled dreams. I think it's safe to say that many healthy parents live just a bit vicariously through their children. Birthday parties and holidays tend to be a good example of that. Lots of people just want to give their kids a better childhood than the one they had, and I don't believe that's inherently bad or toxic. However, it becomes problematic when parents don't know how to create boundaries and recognize that their child is independent and a different person from themselves. Toxic parents expect the worst of their own kids. Everybody knows that teenagers are not typically the most responsible or the wisest people around. And that's not an insult to teens. It's just developmentally and culturally, they don't have the tools they need to make their best decisions. Healthy parents, though, are able to recognize that the teenage years can be hard, and they strive for a healthy balance of understanding and expectations, along with age and individually appropriate responsibilities. Toxic parents, however, again, are different. They flip out during the teen years and expect the worst. They have the tendency to expect the worst even at younger ages. The whole problem with expecting the worst, though, is that you tend to bring out the worst behavior. Most kids feel it so deeply when they recognize that their parents don't believe in them and think highly of them. They're going to act the way their parents feel, like they're a bad kid. Toxic parents may expect their children to perform. On the opposite side of low expectations is the toxic parent who expects way too much from their kids. Parents who expect too much often do so because they have the idea that children are supposed to make their parents look good, or basically perform for them. This type of toxic parent cares excessively about appearances. They don't care so much about what their child has learned or what their accomplished are. They want to know that their kid will impress other people. Parents like this might be fixated on things like grades, physical beauty, career status, or popularity. It never really matters what the fixation is. Just the fact that it exists is damaging enough. Manipulative behaviors is the fourth way that toxic parenting shows up. Your parent may try to control you by using guilt or shame to play with your emotions. Toxic parents may even hold time, money, or other items as pawns in their manipulation game. Every child has experienced a guilt trip from their parents. However, toxic individuals resort to this tactic on a regular basis. Even as an adult, your parents might still be controlling you by giving you expensive gifts and then expecting something in return. If you fail to do as they want, they'll try everything they can to make you feel guilty about it because of everything they've done for you. Healthy parents, however, know that children do not owe them a specific response in exchange for money or gifts, especially when these items were not even asked for in the first place. Toxic parents will resort to guilt and manipulation to get you to change your mind. Sometimes the manipulation will be very subtle, and sometimes it's very blatant. The stress is usually the same when you're a child, even if you're a grown child, who simply doesn't want to disappoint their mom or dad. In a healthy parent-child relationship, though, both parties can express hurt, frustration, and disappointment without making demands or insisting that the other person overlooks the wants and needs of the other just to make one party or the other happy. Keeping score. Some parents remember every little wrong thing their child does. If their kid gets into any sort of trouble, their parent never lets them live it down. And should their child need any sort of help, it's this sort of parent who is likely to write it down and bring it up far into the future. This may be the same type of parent to call their kid a mistake or treat them like a burden. Instead of teaching their kids that family is always there for each other, they give their kid the sense that love has limits and that they're running out of goodwill. As we mentioned in the opening, toxic parents take no blame and make zero apologies. Some parents have never apologized to the children for the things that they've done wrong, and they refuse to believe that their kids even deserve an apology from a parent. Parents like this often have a toxic understanding of parenthood as a default position of being in charge and always being right. And yet, when things go wrong, these parents are the first to blame outside forces. If their kids attend therapy, they might sarcastically ask what they're going to be blamed for this time. They often see themselves as martyrs, the last heroes in a dying lineage of authoritarians. This sort of toxic parent has no idea why their kids won't talk to them when they grow up. They may suspect it's some outside influence and never even consider that they did anything wrong. How could they, after all? Parents like these simply don't believe they've done anything wrong in the first place. Most parents genuinely do their best to provide their children with a happy and healthy upbringing, but even these individuals can accidentally make mistakes. However, some parents go beyond the occasional mistakes and veer into the toxic category. Regardless of whether a parent is purposefully being toxic, there are several behaviors that can cause so much emotional and mental damage to a child that it ends up greatly. Anyone can become toxic when they lose sight of the big picture, that our kids need us to think about the way our interactions will shape them for the rest of their lives. And many of us have unfortunately grown up with toxic parents ourselves, which means we have at least in some way gotten used to seeing some toxic traits as normal or even healthy. The good news is that whether we have become parents or not, we don't need to be stuck in these repeating cycles. We can recognize the toxic traits passed down in our families and stop them in ourselves. It takes work, but it's good work. It's the sort of work that makes you think that maybe the whole world isn't as messed up as we once thought. And perhaps there are a lot more kindred spirits than we ever even expected. Don't forget to join our Facebook group for calm, empathetic, supportive parents and caregivers using the link below in the description. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching, and wherever you are in your day, hug your child and make it a great one.